The hall of the Red Keep smelled of smoke and old blood. The Iron Throne, twisted from the melted swords of conquered men, loomed high above as though daring anyone to sit upon it. For years, it had been the prize that broke kings, the seat that swallowed their souls. And now, against every prophecy and every oath sworn in fire and ice, Jon Snow stood before it. He was no longer just the bastard boy from Winterfell, no longer the brooding brother in black upon the wall. He had faced death, betrayal, the cruelty of men, and the madness of queens. He had slain his queen, Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, because her fire had turned to ashes and her dream of freedom had become a nightmare of tyranny. He had stood before her body as her dragons screamed into the sky, and for a moment Jon had wanted to die with her. But death did not take him. The living still called for a king. It was the lords of Westeros who decided. They gathered in the dragon pit, their faces gaunt from war and loss, their voices sharp with suspicion. The Stark girl, Sansa, demanded independence. For the North, Arya, silent and cold-eyed, refused to speak at all. Tyrion Lannister, weary and broken, dared suggest that kings be chosen, not born. Yet when the choice lay before them, between shattered houses, deadlines, and broken heirs, it was Jon Snow whose name clung to their lips. Jon Targaryen, some whispered, for the truth of his blood had spilled into the realm like wildfire. He was the son of Rhaegar, the last dragon prince, and Lyanna Stark, the wolf maid of Winterfell. He was no bastard, but the true heir. Others spat at the thought, for they saw in him the shadow of Daenerys, the dragon queen he had killed. They remembered her fire, her ashes, her wrath, but in the end it was compromise, not love, that crowned him. He was both wolf and dragon, both north and south, and his face was carved in the likeness of Ned Stark's honor. He was not chosen with cheers, but with silence, not with loyalty, but with exhaustion. The lords were tired of war. The people were tired of kings who promised salvation but brought only ruin, and so Jon Snow ascended the Iron Throne. The weight of it was heavier than the steel that crowned his brow. He did not smile as others had done. He did not shout for banners, nor call for feasts. He sat with a solemnity that unnerved even his closest allies. To many, he looked like a man preparing for his own funeral. Whispers spread through the Red. Keep in those first days of his reign. Some called him the bastard king, unworthy of the chair he sat upon. Others said he was cursed, for he had slain the woman who loved him and stolen the seat she died for. The small folk muttered that he was a Stark, cold as the snows of Winterfell, who would never understand the hunger and heat of King's Landing. And in the north, men who once called him brother turned their backs, for they said he had betrayed his people by sitting on a southern throne. Even Sansa's letters were sharp with frost. "You are no king of mine," she wrote, signing as Queen in the North. Arya did not write at all. Jon bore it all in silence. He had been raised in shadows, always half a man, always watching others claim the warmth of belonging. He was used to the sting of being unwanted, but never before had the burden been so great. For the Iron Throne was no place for wolves, and no place for bastards. At night he dreamed of Daenerys, her silver hair spilling across his chest, her eyes burning with visions of a world made new. He woke with sweat on his skin and guilt in his heart. Each time he entered the hall and sat upon the throne Robert Baratheon had built, he felt her absence like a blade pressed against his ribs. She had wanted this throne more than anyone, and in killing her he had taken it. The Lord saw a king, but Jon Snow saw only a kinslayer, a usurper, a fraud. And somewhere far across the sea, Drogon carried her body through storm and shadow. No man knew where the beast flew, but some whispered he carried her to Valyria, to places where dragons still breathed, and others whispered darker things. that one day Dragonfire would return to burn the bastard king from the throne he never wanted. But for now, Jon Snow ruled, and the realm waited to see whether he would heal it or destroy it, as all kings before him had done. The ravens arrived before dawn, black wings against a pale sky. Jon had learned long ago that no good tidings came at such an hour. He sat in the council chamber, his cloak heavy on his shoulders, Ghost lying at his feet like a silent shadow. The letters were spread across the table, ink, blood, and venom scrawled into words. The North had spoken. Sansa Stark, his half-sister who was more queen than girl now, wrote with the sharpness of a blade, "The North remembers, and the North bows to no southern throne. We will honor you as brother, but not as king. The crown you wear is yours, not ours." Jon read the words again and again until the letters blurred. He could almost hear her voice, calm, firm, untouchable. She loved him, perhaps, but she would not follow him. The North had broken away, and there was no hand strong enough to pull it back. The other letters were worse. From the Vale, Lord Grafton muttered about debts unpaid. From the Reach, the remnants of House Tyrell's bannermen demanded recompense for their burned fields and slaughtered kin. Dorne's new prince wrote little more than a threat. "We suffered dragons once, we will not suffer them again." The Sidar, 7 kingdoms, were 7 only in name. Jon sat upon the Iron Throne, but his rule reached no further than the walls of King's Landing. Tyrion stood by the window, his face half in shadow. "Do you know what they call you?" he asked, sipping from a cup of watered wine. Jon did not answer. "The bastard king," Tyrion said, as if testing the words. "The usurper's usurper. The wolf in dragon's skin. They whisper that you betrayed your queen to steal her crown." He looked at Jon, his mismatched eyes sharper than any sword. "They whisper you will do the same to them." "I never wanted the crown," Jon said, his voice low. "I killed her because I had no choice. She would have burned them all." "And yet," Tyrion replied, "you sit the throne that was meant for her." "Intentions matter little, Jon Snow. Perception is the only coin that spends in politics, and your purse is already thin." Jon looked at him, weary. "What would you have me do?" Tyrion set down his cup. "Rule. With fear, if not love. Robert held the throne with his hammer and his temper. Your father, Ned Stark, held respect because men knew he would not bend. You must decide what sort of king you are before they decide it for you." The words lingered like smoke. Jon had spent his life trying to do what was right, but kingship was not about right. It was about survival. That night, the small council gathered. What remained of it, at least. Tyrion as hand, Sir Davos as master. Of ships, Gendry, Robert's bastard-turned-lord, sat uneasily as master of war, though he seemed more blacksmith than lord still. Samwell Tarly, soft-spoken but steady, had come to serve as Grand Maester, a table of loyal men perhaps, but hardly. A force to hold a kingdom. "The treasury is bare," Tyrion announced, slapping a ledger onto the table. "The Lannisters are gone, and with them their gold. The Reach is in ashes, the Riverlands a graveyard, and Dorne refuses tribute. We cannot feed the city, let alone the realm." "The people starve," Davos added, "and they curse your name. Who for it? They say the bastard king has no bread for their children." Sam spoke next, hesitant. "There is talk of rebellion. Pockets of loyalists to Daenerys still gather in secret. Some believe she lives." Jon's head rose sharply. "She is dead," Sam swallowed. "Perhaps. But the dragon was seen flying east with her body. Men believe what they wish, and hope is harder to kill than flesh. They whisper she will return, with fire to burn you from the throne." Silence fell. Ghost shifted, his red eyes glowing in the torchlight. Jon clenched his fists. "If they want me gone, they will have to kill me." Again. It was not bravado. It was truth. He had died once, bled into the snow, betrayed by his own men. He had felt the cold hand of death and returned. That wound still haunted him, a scar, deeper than flesh, and yet here he was, wearing a crown he never asked for, hated by those he sought to protect. Later, when the council dispersed, Jon remained alone in the hall of the throne. He walked to it slowly, the jagged swords catching the torchlight. He touched the steel, felt the bite of its sharpness. Robert Baratheon had built his rule upon rebellion, upon broken oaths and rivers of blood, and Jon had inherited it, not as a victor, but as a condemned man waiting for the axe. He sat, and the weight of the Iron Throne pressed into his bones. Outside, in the streets of King's Landing, unrest began to stir. Small folk gathered at night to curse the bastard king's name, to pray for Daenerys' return, or to whisper of rebellion in alleys and taverns. The city burned once by dragonfire was ready to burn again, this time from within, and somewhere in the north, Queen Sansa raised her banners, not against her brother, but not for him either. Independence was only the first step. The game of thrones was not over. It had only shifted, and Jon Snow was already losing. The first riot began in Flea Bottom. It was a hot, airless day, the sort of day that made tempers short and bellies ache. Bread had not reached the poorer districts for a week, and water was fouled from broken cisterns. A single wagon of grain, meant to feed the orphans in the Sept, was overturned by desperate hands. What began as hunger turned into fire. By nightfall, the cries of "Bastard King" rang through the crooked alleys. Torches were raised, shops broken into, and the guards sent to quiet. The mob were drowned beneath stones and knives. The city, that Daenerys had burned with dragonfire, now threatened to devour itself with rage. Jon rode out with the gold cloaks at his side, Ghost trotting silently beside his horse. He had seen riots before, on the wall, in Winterfell, even in the wild. Camps beyond, but never like this. These were not enemies from without. These were his own people. They spat when they saw him, screamed for Daenerys, for bread, for blood. A woman with soot on her face hurled a stone at his chest, shrieking, "You murdered the queen! You stole her throne!" Others took up the cry, until it was a roar that shook the narrow streets. "Stand down!" Jon shouted, his voice echoing. "Go back to your homes, and you will not be harmed." But hunger had no ears. The mob surged forward, and the gold cloaks answered with steel. Screams cut the night, and blood soaked the cobblestones. Jon fought to control the chaos, ordering the guards to hold, to spare who they could, but the flames of desperation could not be doused with mercy. By dawn, Flea Bottom stank of smoke and death. Dozens lay slain, hundreds beaten or taken in chains. The riot was broken, but so too was the city's trust. When Jon returned to the Red Keep, his cloak was black with soot, his hands shaking. He sat in silence as Tyrion poured wine. "This is only the beginning," Tyrion said softly. "A starving city is a dangerous one. Fear may hold them for a time, but it will not feed them." Jon's voice was raw. "I never wanted this. I never asked to rule." Tyrion's eyes, sharp and tired, met his, nor did most of the men who wore that crown. "Yet here you sit. If you will not fight for it, they will tear it from your head." Jon said nothing. He felt the throne pressing on him even when he was far from it, as though the swords beneath him had sunk into his flesh. That night Davos came to him quietly. "There's worse news, lad. We've taken some prisoners from the riot, Daenerys loyalists. They swear the queen still lives." Jon frowned. "How?" "They claim Drogon carried her east, not to Valyria, but to Essos, to the Red Priests in Volantis. They say she will be reborn in fire, as the prophecy foretold." Davos hesitated, his face grave. "And some fools believe it." Jon's stomach tightened. He remembered Melisandre, her burning eyes, her talk of prophecy and chosen ones. He had seen her call fire from nothing, seen her bring him back from death itself. Could he so easily dismiss the thought that Daenerys might rise again? But he pushed it away. She is dead. I saw her die. Davos sighed. Aye, but dead queens make good martyrs and better banners, and indeed the banners soon appeared. Black flags with three-headed dragons painted in red hung from hidden corners of the city. In taverns, whispers spread, "The queen will return. The bastard will fall." Jon ordered them torn down, the whisperers seized, but for every banner burned, 2 more seemed to rise. For every tongue cut out, 10 more spoke in secret. Fear was spreading faster than law. The small council quarreled. Tyrion urged harsh measures, executions, a show of power. Davos counselled mercy, warning that blood would only water the seeds of rebellion. Gendry, awkward in his lord's chair, slammed his fist on the table. The people want a Baratheon, not a bastard wolf or a dragon spawn. Let me lead them. His eyes met Jon's with a mixture of loyalty and envy. Jon only listened, silent as stone. But when the council ended, Sam lingered. "You can't fight shadows, Jon," he said softly. "If people believe Daenerys lives, it matters less whether it's true. Belief is a weapon, and someone is wielding it against you." Jon looked at him, the weight of truth heavy in his chest. "Then I must find who." The city slept uneasy that night, smoke still rising from the charred ruins of Flea Bottom. And in the dark halls of the Red Keep, Jon Snow lay awake, listening to the whispers that crept even through stone walls. The bastard king, kinslayer, usurper. He had slain his queen to save the realm. Yet the realm cursed him for it. And somewhere, beyond the sea, in the red glow of distant temples, fanatics whispered another name, Daenerys Stormborn, mother of dragons, the queen who will rise again. The Red Keep had always been a nest of vipers, but Jon had never cared for the games of lords and ladies. He preferred the bite of steel to the sting of words. Yet now, as king, he found daggers were hidden more often in cups and courtesies than in hands. Reports came daily of meetings in secret chambers, of lords who dined together behind locked doors. Tyrion kept a careful watch, but his eyes could not be everywhere. The city was full of whispers, and even the walls seemed to listen. It was Ser Davos who brought the truth to Jon first. "There's talk of a council within your own council," the old knight muttered one evening. "A gathering of discontent. They're saying your rule is weak, that you've no claim but the sword you used to slay the Dragon Queen. And worse, they mean to put another on the throne." Jon frowned. "Who?" Davos leaned forward, his voice low. "Gendry Baratheon." The words struck like a blow. Jon remembered the boy-turned-lord, Robert's bastard raised from the forge to a title Daenerys had gifted. And Gendry had fought bravely, rode rivers, swung hammers, bled beside him against the dead. He was honest, loyal, or had been. Yet Robert's blood carried weight, and some men longed for the days of the stag more than the wolf or dragon. "Do you believe it?" Jon asked quietly. Davos's face was grave. "I believe men want a king they can name without shame. You are a Stark to some, a Targaryen to others, but always a bastard in their eyes. Gendry's no less a bastard, true, but he carries Robert's likeness. That counts for more than honor in this city." Jon felt the weight of it. He had killed Daenerys to save the realm, but Robert Baratheon had built this throne with his rebellion. If his son claimed it, would the realm not follow? That night Jon summoned Gendry. The young lord came in simple clothes, his hammer still at his hip like a shield against the world. He bowed awkwardly, no courtly grace in his movements. "You sent for me, your grace?" Jon studied him. His face bore Robert's strength, his eyes honest as a smith's fire. He was not made for schemes, Jon thought, but that did not mean he could not be used by them. They say some would have you sit this throne, Jon said. Gendry stiffened. I never asked for that. Neither did I, Jon replied. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Gendry spoke, his voice heavy. I swore to Daenerys, and she made me Lord of Storm's End. Some say I betrayed her by kneeling to you. Others say I should take her place. But I am no king. I'm a blacksmith, nothing more. Jon searched his face for lies, but found none. Still, he knew how men could twist even the honest into symbols. If ever you do seek it, Jon warned. Softly, know that the throne will cost you more than you can bear. Gendry met his gaze. And has it not cost you already? Jon said nothing. But the matter did not end there. Days later, Tyrion brought darker news. The conspiracy is larger than Davos guessed, he told Jon as they walked the gardens. House Redwine of the Reach, House Ironwood of Dawn, even some in the Vale. Small lords, but many. They gather under the banner of restoring Robert's line. They see Daenerys' death as your crime, and Gendry as their answer. And Gendry? Jon asked. Tyrion's mouth curled. He may not wish it, but wishes matter little when men see crowns in their wine cups. Jon's jaw tightened. He thought of Robert, the usurper who had taken the throne with a hammer, and a war. His bastard son was being pushed down the same road, whether he wanted it or not. That evening, Jon walked alone through the throne room. The Iron Throne loomed, jagged and cruel, mocking him with its promise of power. Robert had built his rule upon rebellion, and now rebellion brewed again beneath the same roof. He whispered into the silence, "How many more must die for this chair?" Ghost's red eyes watched him, unblinking. The following night, another riot broke in the fish market. But this one was no accident of hunger. Torches lit the banners of the stag. Men cried out, "For Robert's son, for King Gendry!" The gold cloaks struggled, and blood ran through the gutters. Jon himself rode, down to quell it, his sword flashing in the firelight. He fought like the wolf he was, driving the mob apart, but the cries followed him as he returned to the Red Keep. Bastard. Usurper. Kinslayer. The Iron Throne seemed colder when he sat upon it, the swords digging deeper into his skin. He had wanted to save the realm. Instead, he had inherited Robert's ghosts, Daenerys' fire, and now the rising stag. The Game of Thrones had never ended. It had only found new players. The council chamber reeked of sweat and fear. Word of the stag banners had spread, and though the rioters had been scattered, the damage was done. Gendry's name was no longer just whispered in taverns, it was shouted in the streets. Jon sat at the head of the table, his face shadowed by torchlight. Tyrion poured himself wine before speaking, his voice clipped. "The realm tests you, your grace. They believe your crown is fragile, so they press against it. You cannot meet this with silence. You must answer." "Answer with what?" Jon asked, his voice low. "Blood," Tyrion replied simply. "Find the ringleaders, make examples of them, show the people that betrayal brings only death." Davos shook his head, leaning forward. "If you spill blood in the streets, you'll drown the city in it. They already call him Bastard King. They'll call him Butcher King next. And once they see you as a tyrant, you'll never crawl back from it." "Mercy will not hold a throne," Tyrion countered sharply. "Fear will." Sam spoke softly, almost timidly, but his words struck deep. "You've been here before, Jon. You tried mercy at Castle Black, and they stabbed you in the heart. You tried mercy with Daenerys, and she burned the city. You tried mercy with Cersei's men, and they betrayed you at Winterfell. Mercy has cost you everything." The chamber fell silent. Even Davos had no reply. Jon stared at the table, his hands curled into fists. He remembered the knives piercing his chest at the wall, the look in Daenerys' eyes when his sword slid through. Her heart, the screams of children as dragonfire consumed them. He had bled for mercy, killed for mercy, lost for mercy, and now mercy was being asked of him again. He rose suddenly, the chair scraping back. "I will not be Robert drunk on his hammer. I will not be Ares burning men alive. And I will not be Daenerys ruling with fire and fear. I'll find another way." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "And what way is that? Words? Promises? Bread you do not have?" Jon turned his back. "I'll find it," he muttered, though he sounded more like a man making a prayer than a king making a plan. When the council broke, Tyrion lingered. "Your Grace," he said quietly, "you may despise the throne, but you cannot ignore it. If you will not be feared, then you must be loved. And if you are not loved, you will be neither feared nor obeyed. And then you will be nothing." Jon met his gaze. "Maybe nothing is what I should have been, but the realm would not allow him nothing." That night, as Jon walked the dark halls of the Red Keep, Ghost padded silently at his side. He found Gendry waiting outside his chambers, guarded by 2 nervous gold cloaks. The young lord bowed. "Your Grace." Jon dismissed the guards and looked at him hard. "Why are your banners flying in the fish market?" Gendry's brow furrowed. "I swear on my life I had no part in it. I've spoken no words against you." "But others speak them for you," Jon said. "And the more they cry your name, the closer you come to treason, whether you wish it or not." "I didn't ask for this," Gendry said, his voice heavy. "I don't want your throne, but I can't stop men from remembering Robert Baratheon and seeing his face in mine. They want something simple, a smith's son with a hammer, not a bastard wolf, not a dragon's heir." Jon felt a cold twist in his chest. "If they force you to it, will you take it?" Gendry looked away. "I don't know." Jon dismissed him with a wave, though his hands shook after. He trusted Gendry's heart, but hearts mattered little in this game. Men would make him a king, even if he cursed the crown. The next day, news broke of a secret meeting in a brothel near the Gate of the Gods. Lords of the Reach, the Stormlands, and even the Vale had gathered under shadow, swearing oaths to the stag. The Goldcloaks stormed the place, dragging out 6 nobles. 2 resisted and were cut down. When they were brought before Jon, he saw no shame in their eyes, only defiance. One spat at his feet and shouted, "Kinslayer! Usurper! You murdered the true queen and stole her throne." The hall filled with whispers. Some cried for mercy, others for execution. Jon's hand tightened on Longclaw's hilt. He could end it now, make examples, prove Tyrion right. Yet as he stared into the noble's eyes, he saw not just defiance, but certainty. If he executed them, their blood would make martyrs. If he freed them, their whispers would grow louder. There was no right choice, only ruin. Jon rose slowly, the Iron Throne towering behind him. "Take them to the dungeons," he commanded at last. His voice carried no triumph, only weariness. "Their fate will be decided when the realm itself is steadied." The crowd erupted in mutters, some angered, some relieved. Tyrion's frown was sharp as a blade. Davos looked away, and Jon Snow, the bastard king, felt the throne dig deeper into his back, the weight of swords cutting into his soul. The attempt came at night. Jon had grown used to restless sleep, waking to the crackle of fire or the sound of his own dreams. But this night Ghost stirred before he did. The dire wolf's low growl cut through the dark like a blade. Jon reached for Longclaw as the chamber door creaked open. A shadow slipped inside. The glint of steel caught the moonlight. Jon rose in an instant. The assassin lunged, dagger aimed. For his chest. Ghost sprang, knocking the man sideways, teeth sinking deep into his arm. The dagger clattered to the floor. Jon's sword flashed, and with a single stroke the assassin lay dying on the stones, blood pooling beneath him. Jon knelt beside the body. The face was young, hardly older than a boy. His eyes, glazed with death, still held a hint of fury. And carved into the leather of his jerkin was the faint outline of a red three-headed dragon. A loyalist. Daenerys's shadow still hunted him. By dawn, The Red Keep was in uproar. The gold cloaks searched every corner, dragging out suspected conspirators. Tyrion stood grim-faced in the council chamber. This was no lone act. You are not fighting one dagger, but a dozen. Cut off one hand, and another rises. Where did he come from? Jon demanded. From within, Tyrion replied grimly. One of your own guards let him through the outer gates. Gold cloaks sworn to you have been bought or turned. The words sank like stones in Jon's chest. If even the men sworn to guard his life could not be trusted, then who was left? Davos slammed his fist against the table. If your enemies are in your walls, we must smoke them out. Every traitor must hang. Sam shifted uneasily. And how many innocents will hang with them? Rumors and suspicion make poor evidence. If you turn the Red Keep into a gallows, the people will curse you louder than they do already. Jon looked from one to the other. His head ached with the weight of it. He had led men in battle where foes wore their colors openly. But this was war fought in shadows, where every face might hide a knife. Later that day, the captured guard was brought before him. A man in his 40s, thick-set, with eyes red from sleeplessness. He spat when Jon questioned him. You're no king. You betrayed the true queen, and her fire will rise again. I only did what honor demanded. Jon's voice was calm, though inside he burned. And you would cut a man's throat in the dark. Call that honor? The man only laughed, bitterly. Better than sitting on a throne you do not deserve. Tyrion urged execution on the spot. Davos counseled exile. But Jon gave the order himself, voice flat as iron. Hang him from the gates. Let the city see what treachery earns. The man died with curses on his lips, Daenerys' name carried in the wind. That evening, unrest shook the streets again. Crowds gathered outside the Red Keep, some weeping, some spitting. The word spread quickly. The bastard king kills his own men. Women wailed, men cursed, and children screamed Daenerys' name as if it were a prayer. Inside the keep, the conspirators in the dungeon stirred. Rumors of Jon's paranoia spread, painting him as a tyrant who trusted no one. Tyrion warned him, every drop of blood hardens the line against you. Soon it will not be whispers, but open war. Jon stared into the fire that night. Longclaw, across his knees. Perhaps war is all that's left, he murmured, but even within the keep, trust crumbled. Food sent to Jon's chambers was tested for poison. Scrolls arrived sealed, their words half-truths and veiled threats. And one morning, a servant vanished from the kitchens, leaving behind a painted dragon pin. It was Sam who finally spoke what others would not. You are surrounded, Jon, not by swords you can strike, but by ghosts. Daenerys' memory burns brighter than your crown, and no steel can cut a shadow. Jon looked at him hollow-eyed. Then tell me, Sam, how do I fight? What I cannot touch. Sam said nothing. There was no answer. That night, Jon walked once more to the Iron Throne. The swords twisted upward, jagged and cruel. He ran his hand along their edges, cutting his palm on the steel. Blood dripped onto the steps, as though the throne itself demanded sacrifice. He whispered into the empty hall, how many more must I kill before they call me king? Ghost whined softly, but there was no other reply. Outside, beyond the walls of King's Landing, the banners of the stag and the dragon began to rise together. What had begun as whispers and riots was becoming something larger, something sharper, rebellion. The rebellion did not arrive with drums or banners at first. It came with whispers carried by ravens, then with skirmishes in the dark. Grain caravans bound for King's Landing were seized in the Reach. Dawn's ships blocked trade along the narrow sea. In the Riverlands, minor lords raised dragon banners, swearing themselves to Daenerys' memory, though she lay cold in some unknown grave. And in the Stormlands, men shouted Gendry's name, lifting stags upon green fields. The realm was cracking again, and Jon Snow sat in the middle of it, wearing a crown that felt more like a noose. In the council chamber, Tyrion spread a map across the table. Red marks bled across the parchment. Rebellion in 3 kingdoms, unrest in 2 more. You rule King's Landing and little else. A king without a kingdom is a man in a borrowed chair. Jon leaned over the map. What of the north? Davos shifted uneasily. Sansa holds fast. She does not ride against you, but nor does she bend knee. The north stands apart, untouched by the fires here. Safe for now. Tyrion's mouth twisted. Safe for her, perhaps, but unsafe for you. The people call you kinslayer already. They say you killed Daenerys, your queen and lover. What will? They say if you march north to break your sister's crown, bastard turned butcher of his own blood. Jon stared at the map, the swords of the Iron Throne pressed against his back, even when he stood far from it. To fight the stag and dragon banners in the south meant leaving the north unchecked, free to harden its claim of independence. To march north meant abandoning King's Landing to rebellion, handing the city to his enemies. Either path was ruin. Do nothing, Tyrion warned, and ruin will find you faster. The council argued long into the night. Davos urged negotiation. Gendry's no traitor at heart. Speak to him, remind him of his oath. If he truly wants no crown, he'll say it before his men. But Sam shook his head. It won't matter what he says. Men want to believe. They want a Baratheon hammering on their behalf, not a Targaryen wolf brooding on a throne of swords. Jon listened silent. He thought of Gendry's words, "I don't want your throne," and how little weight they carried against banners and blood. That night, Jon walked alone along the battlements of the Red Keep. The city below flickered with torchlight. Some torches were carried by guards, others by mobs that cursed his name. Ghost padded beside him, silent, watchful. Jon thought of Winterfell, of quiet snows and the warmth of hearth fires. He thought of his father, Ned Stark, who had chosen honor and lost his head. He thought of Daenerys, who had chosen fire and lost her soul. And he thought of himself, caught between wolf and dragon, bastard and king. Tyrion found him there. The hand steps were slow, his voice softer than usual. Do you know what Robert said of this city years ago? He hated it, called it a pit of snakes and dung, yet he ruled it all the same, because power was his hammer, and he knew how to swing it. You are not Robert, you will never be Robert, but the throne demands the same of you, strength even if it's borrowed. Jon turned to him, eyes dark. Strength built on lies breaks, I've seen it. Then build on truth, Tyrion said. Tell the realm what you are, not the bastard king, not the usurper. Tell them you are Jon Stark, Jon Targaryen, Jon Snow. Tell them all of it. Let them choke on the truth until they cannot deny you. Jon almost laughed, though there was no joy in it. Truth has never saved me, Tyrion. Perhaps not, Tyrion admitted, but it may yet save your throne. By dawn, ravens flew again. Jon sent messages across the realm, calling for parley, with Gendry Baratheon, and even to the Reach and Riverlands, where dragon banners rose. Few replies came. The Stag Lords answered only with silence, the Dragon Loyalists with curses, but from the north came one letter, written in Sansa's neat hand. I will not march against you, Jon, but neither will I march for you. The north remembers. The north stands alone. Jon read it 3 times, then folded it carefully. His sister's words were colder than winter, yet kinder than rebellion. Still, they were no help. That evening, word arrived that a host of Stormland lords had gathered at Storm's End, raising banners under Gendry's name. Whether he willed it or not, Robert's son was becoming the figurehead of the rebellion. Jon looked at the Iron Throne, jagged and cruel. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. Then I will march, south first, against the stag. Tyrion only nodded. Davos muttered a prayer, and Ghost bared his teeth at the dark horizon, as if he already smelled blood. The bastard king was going to war. The march south was slow, burdened not just by men, but by doubt. The host that followed Jon Snow was meagre compared to the armies, once raised for Robert or Daenerys. King's Landing could spare only a fraction of soldiers, the rest tied to holding a city that already seethed with unrest. The banners that trailed him were faded, wolves stitched beside dragons, a mismatched union that convinced no one. At every village they passed, the people looked on in silence. Some spat, some wept and begged for bread, but none cheered. Jon rode at the front with Ghost padding beside him, his crown hidden beneath a plain helm. He had no taste for the trappings of kingship. He felt more like a condemned man marching to his own gallows. Word came quickly. Gendry Baratheon held Storm's End. The castle that Robert had once ruled was now a nest for rebellion, its walls hung with stag banners. Gendry had not called himself king, but the lords around him shouted the word loudly enough. When Jon's host reached the Stormlands, the air was heavy with salt and thunder. Storm's End rose from the sea like a giant's fist, unbroken by centuries of siege. To take it by force would cost thousands, and Jon had no thousands to spare, so he sent a raven under his own name. "Meet me outside your walls, speak with me, and let the realm be spared more blood." To his surprise, Gendry agreed. The meeting was held on a rocky plain beneath the looming cliffs. Jon rode out with Davos and a handful of guards. Gendry came, with no more than 2 knights. He looked uncomfortable in lord's armor, hammer strapped across his back, but his face was steady. They faced each other in the salt wind, 2 bastards bound by crowns they had never wanted. "You shouldn't be here," Jon said at last. "Nor should you," Gendry answered. They stood in silence for a time, the sea crashing below. Then Jon spoke. "Do you want it? The throne?" Gendry's jaw tightened. "I never asked for it, but men call my name. They say I'm Robert's son, that his blood still has claim. They want something simple, a hammer, not a crown of swords. And he hesitated. "I can't ignore them forever." Jon looked at him, the wind tugging his cloak. "If you take it, the realm burns again. More children starve, more men die. I killed Daenerys to end fire and blood. Don't make me kill Robert's son to keep it ended." Gendry's eyes met his, filled with something like grief. "And if you will not yield," Jon's voice was low, "then we do as our fathers did, and the realm drowns in war again." The words hung between them like a blade. That night, thunder rolled across the Stormlands. Both camps waited. Soldiers, sharpening swords, banners whipping in the wind. Some prayed for battle, others prayed for peace. Jon sat in his tent, staring at the fire. Ghost lay at his feet, restless. Tyrion came quietly. "There's a choice here, Jon. You can fight and perhaps win, or you can yield and live. Either way, the realm will remember. The question is, what do you want them to remember you as?" Jon said nothing. He had never thought of legacy. He had only ever thought of doing what was right. Yet right and wrong had become as twisted as the swords of the throne. When dawn broke, Jon rode once more to the plain before Storm's End. Rain fell in sheets, soaking him to the bone. Gendry was already there, hammer across his saddle. The 2 armies waited behind. Them, breath held, one word, one strike, and the field would drown in blood. Jon drew Longclaw, but not to raise it. He drove the blade into the wet earth between them. "I am done," he said, his voice carrying through the storm. "I will not fight you, Gendry. I will not fight the realm. If they want a king, let them have you. Let them have Robert's son." Gasps rippled through the lines. Gendry stared at him, stunned. "You'd yield after all this?" Jon's face was hard, but his eyes burned. "I killed the woman I loved because she would have burned this realm to ash. I will not kill a man who..." Never asked for a crown just to keep one I never wanted? Take it. But remember, every drop of blood spilled for this throne stains not just you, but all of us." He turned his horse, Ghost at his side, and rode away. The lords shouted, some in triumph, some in confusion. Gendry called after him, but Jon did not look back. By nightfall, the stag banners flew higher. Word spread quickly. Jon Snow had abandoned the throne, yielding it to Robert's son. Some called him coward, others called him saint. The small folk whispered he had been broken by guilt, that the bastard king had never been king at all. But Jon did not care. He rode north, crownless, nameless once more. The Iron Throne remained, jagged and cruel, waiting for its next victim. Robert had built it in blood. Daenerys had claimed it in fire. Jon Snow had left it in silence, and the realm would decide which of them had been right.